Let's get started making this really fun face vase. We're going to start by activating the clay, which just means that we're going to pull it apart and put it back together. That's telling the clay it's ready to get started working. Then we'll take that clay and roll it into a sphere, placing it in the middle of this color wheel. And then we're going to take the clay mat, the MoxieBox clay mat, and fold it over and then press it down. What we're creating here is called a slab. So we're pressing it down to make it into a pancake, and we want that circle to be the same size as the circle within the color wheel. So that smaller circle inside the color wheel. Let's take a look. This is what I'm talking about right here. Pick that slab up, and we're going to take one of the smaller cups or the shorter cups, placing it into the center. Now with your hands, you're just going to be wrapping this slab around the cup. So I'm kind of manipulating it with my hands, pressing it down with my fingers so that I get a nice even coat of clay all the way around the edge. I do not want this clay to go over the top, so I'll go ahead and rip some of this off if you have extra, and we'll just set it aside. We'll be able to use that later. And if you experience any air bubbles in between the clay and the glass, just use your clay tool, add a little hole in it, just like I'm doing here, down at the very bottom, and that'll release the clay. No one's going to see that because we'll be covering it up. Now, another thing that we need to cover with clay is the tall glass. So you're going to take that tall glass and create a cylinder or a coil. This is a really chubby coil, but we need to use this coil to kind of start smushing it around the glass. Now, you don't want to smush too hard because it will break the glass, so be very careful of that. But you want a nice even coat, probably about the same as your last cup, all the way around this tall glass as well. Then we're going to go ahead and put this tall glass right in the center of the one that we've already covered. Try to combine those two by just kind of pressing it together. That'll stick actually pretty well. You're going to go ahead and then just smooth out any fingerprints that you left in it. And then we still have one more step to go on the base of our face vase. Let's go ahead and repeat all of those actions again on the other small cup. Then we'll go ahead and pick up our face vase so far, and we're going to place this cup on the very bottom. So again, trying to center it and then pushing them all together. Please make sure that this clay totally dries before you start working on it. You need to give it about 12 hours or more. So just set it aside, and in the meanwhile, you can start drawing your design for what you're going to add for the details and start investigating with the clay. So practicing some of the techniques that you might end up using for your clay project. What you see me doing here is creating a coil. A coil is like a long snake. That is a coil. We use that a lot in clay building. Another thing that we use a lot is creating a sphere. So there's a couple of different ways to do this. Activating the clay first, then rolling it in between your two hands to create that sphere, or placing it down on the mat and rolling it there. Either way works really well. And then the last one that I want to talk about is when you make a sphere and flatten it out. And we've already done this when we were making the Face Vase base. And what you do here is create a sphere again, so rolling it all together and then pressing it down either with your fingers, or you could use your mat, or if you had a rolling pin, that's another way to make a slab. This MoxieBox clay mat is developed for you. It's for you to practice some of the techniques that you can use when working with this clay. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking a coil and I'm kind of setting it on top of the line. You're going to find this to be a little bit more challenging than you would think. So it's very good to practice how to make, this is kind of a wavy line, and then we'll move on to a zigzag. So for a wavy line, you're just moving this back and forth. But the big thing is that you're trying to get all of the angles the exact same, and the length all the same. So that is what you are practicing when you're practicing this. Now you're seeing me use a lot of colored clay, but you might just want to use the white clay, the extra white clay that you have. That is so that you can keep all these beautiful colors for your actual face vase. But I'm using colors so that I can talk about it a little bit easier for recording. I'm making another coil with this purple clay. And what I plan to do here is make a zigzag. So I am going to take one of my clay tools and press, not cut, press into the clay periodically. And I'm using my mat to actually measure this out so it's all the same. Now, making these little creases in the clay is going to allow me to actually move and manipulate the clay so that it makes a little bit stronger zig and zag rather than the wavy line that we just created last. You don't always have to be super fancy when it comes to coils. You can just simplify it by making straight coils and adding them onto whatever you're making vertically or horizontally. So here I'm taking two colors, putting them next to each other, and that actually creates a really beautiful design. This is my favorite way to use coils is it's creating a spiral with them. Now with the messy mat, you might want that spiral and you want them all to be the same size for your design. That's where you can use these circles that I have, lots of different size circles, and you can just go ahead and measure them up as you make your coils to keep them consistent. Now I'm just going to start playing with the clay, and this is what I encourage you to do. Use that white clay that you had that was extra and start playing with the clay, deciding how you're going to add the clay onto your final vase, and just really exploring the different techniques you can come up with or create using clay. There are so many techniques you can discover if you just give yourself the time to play. Playing with art materials is learning and also having a lot of fun. Once your face vase is completely dry, we're going to start by adding some of the base colors. So in my case here, I'm making a skin tone, and you hear me saying making. I do have some dark skin tones and some light skin tones in our MoxieBox kits, but what I'm doing is I'm developing a formula that I want to use on my face vase. So I'm creating these spheres, and I'm using the Moxie mat to actually measure out how much clay I'm doing. You might want to make little notes in your Moxie manual as you're doing this so that you can remember if you need to make more of this clay or this particular color, you will know exactly the formula you used. Once you have the perfect color, you're going to start smearing this wherever the skin belongs. So I'm doing the top part of the face vase, and then I'm going down a little bit just to kind of represent the neck. I'm also going to be thinking about things that are skin colors, such as ears or nose. If you're at a point like this, you have added the clay and you need a break, go ahead and take a break. This is a great time to let this dry a little bit. But I'm going to continue here by adding what I consider to be the shirt on my face vase. So I'm adding these coils like we had practiced already and just creating different color coils around my face vase. I might want to measure it out just so I have information. So this might be something around number 9 or 10. That'll give me an idea of how big these coils have to be. Then I'll press it down to my base and then continue all the way until I get to the bottom of my face vase with the colors that I want to use for the shirt. I did mention that you can let this dry throughout the process. However, if you're going to add some texture into the clay, you need to do that when it's wet. So I'm doing that right here using my toothpick to just make little holes. Any texture that you want to add must be added when the clay is wet. Once the base is down, we're going to start adding some details. This is another part that might take several sittings. Give yourself the time. These details make all the difference. So make sure that you're using the techniques you've practiced and giving yourself the time to really create something that you can be proud of. Again, I'm going to use my mat to measure out some color for the hair. So I'm going to make a darker brown, something that I feel matches my personality of my face vase. And I'm measuring it out, so if I need to make more, I know the formula. What I'm doing is making lots and lots of coils, putting them together and twisting them, and then adding it onto first the back of my face vase and then moving around to the front. You need to consider that this face vase will be looked at from all angles, so make sure all the detail is on every part, the front, side, and back. This is coming along nicely, but I'm not exaggerating when I tell you this took hours. So give yourself the time and the breaks that you need to create. This is another time that I had let my clay project dry a little bit, and now I'm coming back to it. I'm going to be adding some earrings. I'll use my toothpick for this. So I'm going to take my toothpick and actually divide it into two so that I have two earrings. And with my clay, I'll develop my earring design not on my face vase, but on my mat. Then I'll transfer it onto my vase when they are completed. I'll use the toothpick a second time to create a flower that, when dry, I will place into the soil of the grass that we planted, and it will make it look like this face vase has a flower in her hair. Moving on to the final details. I'm thinking about the face, using all the techniques that I've learned or experimented with, and creating a face on my face vase. When all the details are completed, you are going to put everything together, including the grass that you have planted, and place it up in the top. If you have things that you wanted to put in that soil, you can add it on, but man, am I excited about how this face vase turned out. The MoxieBox Art community would love to see what you made. Please take a picture and share it with us on MoxieBoxArt.com.